Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Tonight, we are talking about raising your kids without going broke. Joining us is Bryn Conroy from Fem Frugality. Welcome to the show tonight, Bryn.
Thanks so much, Miranda.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Also joining us tonight, the other members of the Money Mastermind Show, Kyle Prevost from youngandthrifty.ca, Peter Anderson from Bible Money Matters, and Tom Drake from Canadian Finance Blog. Our normal moderator, Glenn Craig from Free From Broke, is not here tonight, so I will be moderating. I am Miranda Marquardt from plantingmoneyseeds.com. Before we get started, please go ahead and check out the Q&A app here on Google Hangouts if you're watching live. We will love your questions. So if you have any questions about raising kids, saving money, or any sort of comments that you want to make, go ahead and let us have it. We would love to read your questions and comments. So let's go ahead and get started. So the USDA expects you to spend more than $200,000 raising your child from birth to age 18. But do you really have to spend that much? So, Bryn, let's start with you since you're our guest. Well, first of all, tell us, do you have kids?
I do. I have 2 kids, so.
Okay, that's exciting. So you're in this here. So how many kids do you have?
I have 2.
What? Sorry, I meant to ask their ages. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, 4 and 2. So they're pretty young still.
Okay, great. So do you envision yourself spending $200,000 a piece on each of them?
No.
What about you, Tom and Peter? Do you guys think you're going to spend $200,000 each on your kids?
I may have done that already, it seems.
Yeah, no. I don't think so. No, there's no way I'm spending that much.
Yeah, I'm more than halfway there with my son, and we are not on track to spend $200,000. Okay, so Bryn, where do you think this number comes from that the USDA gives us? What are some of these costs that they say that we've got for raising kids?
I think part of that number, when you break it down, is housing expenses. So I think a lot of people go out and get bigger houses, they get mortgages, they start buying. They move out of the city and into the suburbs for school districts. So I think that's where like the large portion of that number comes that makes it so insane. I also think people just spend more than they need to on top of all of
that. So what are some of the big expenses that like any of you have seen with kids? I mean, what were some of the big expenses?
If I could just jump in real quick, that USDA study you guys are talking about, they said the figures I had were from 2013, and it was expected to spend $245,000 or so till the kid is 18. And it was broken down by these percentages. It was housing was 30%, food was 16%, transportation 14%, childcare and education 18%, healthcare 8%, clothing 6%, and then just a miscellaneous 8% in there as well. So, like you were saying, housing is a big chunk of it. Childcare and education is another big chunk. It's almost half of it right there.
Right, and if you go there, you can put in like your own individual stats. And I actually did this with my son once to see how much they did and how much they expected to spend on my son. And they took into account like your income level, where you live, and all of that stuff. And on an individual basis, the USDA thinks I should be spending $14,000 a year on my son. I am not spending $14,000 a year on my son. It's not happening. But Tom has some interesting information. He says that he has hit 200K. How did you do that, Tom? Tell us all about how you hit that number.
Basically, I took some old data. We didn't necessarily have a brand new survey here in Canada, but I took a couple old sources and just adjusted them for inflation. But like Bryn said, it's pretty similar actually, because not only is it just under 200,000 Canadian, granted, but it does include shelter and childcare is the biggest expense in the numbers I have. Obviously, yeah, you may not get a bigger house and you may not have childcare, so it doesn't apply perfectly to everyone, but it really is an average.
Huh. So that's interesting. So, but you personally, are you really then on track to do that then?
Well, no, we don't do childcare right off the bat.
Right.
If they're claiming 11,000 and half of that can be childcare in a year, so no, we're not.
But
I know we're not
in
that difference on toys, so
there is a little bit of an opportunity cost there, though, right, Tom? Like, even though it's not 11,000 or whatever the number is coming out of your account for childcare costs, assuming if it were just you and your wife, I have no idea, but it might be your wife might choose to work some hours, whether it was full-time or part-time. So there is an opportunity cost built in there as well.
Oh, for sure. If we never had kids, my wife would still be working and we'd have loads of money.
Say la
right.
vie.
She would have made more than the 5,000 to 6,000, I think, that they could in childcare costs.
All right. So,
yeah. I was to say that was one of those calculations we did when we were having kids as to whether my wife was going to continue working. We're going to put our son into daycare or whatever, and we figured it out that we'd be making just a little bit more by her continuing to work. So it really didn't make a lot of sense for us to do that, because we wanted her to be able to stay home with our son as well. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what were some of the things you guys decided to do, Bryn? Are you staying at home? Is your husband staying at home? How does that work?
Well, we both work.
Ah.
We're also super lucky, though. We have a ton of family in the area. So we get free babysitting all the time and free, quote-unquote, daycare. But we are some of the fortunate few, and we're very well aware and grateful for that. Because
Nice.
in our area, I think it runs around like $15K a year. And it would have been worth it to work for me with that number, but it's still just insane. That's
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a huge portion of your salary.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So, so then what are some of the things you said you definitely do not, you're not on track to spend $200,000 on each of your kids a year. So, I mean, from birth to 18, not per year. But, so what are some of the things that you do to kind of keep your costs down?
From the start, I had really good health insurance when I was expecting them. So right off the bat, like a lot of women spend a few grand just to have their child. I was really fortunate with that. Another thing that we do is like when we're getting them clothes and stuff, they're young enough that we can accept hand-me-downs without them caring. When we do entertainment things like going out to eat or even just children's entertainment, I don't think there's a free thing in this city that my child has not done.
Okay, well, tell us where you live. Tell the audience where you live.
Oh, I'm in Pittsburgh.
Okay. All right. Keep moving. So you're in Pittsburgh and there's no free kid things.
No, there's like so many free kid things. So
oh, there are. Okay.
We never pay for entertainment. Yeah, it's a really cool city. Also, it's really funny. My toddler, he picks up a lot of our money habits already, and it's kind of scary to hear them coming out of his mouth sometimes. And it's really good for us because it's a direct reflection back to us of what we're actually saying and what we're actually living. And a lot of times we're happy with it. So even at a really young age, he gets the concept of saving. We don't have immediate gratification in our home. We have to work and earn things. Not that we rob them of childhood, like there are some rewards and some fun days, but just really instilling those values super young so that we don't get to a point where we're spending so completely out of control.
So one of the things that I have a question then maybe is you talk about this whole idea of robbing them of their childhood. We have this idea that children have to have certain things to have fun. So is that part of our problem? Is that maybe helping to drive the cost up? The fact that we're like, oh, well, we have to give them a really good childhood. Is that part of the problem?
Culturally, as a whole, I would say yes. I don't necessarily agree with this sentiment, but one thing you see a lot of stay-at-home moms say is, why would I go out and work more so I can buy my kids more stuff when really what they want is to be with me. Now me, I work, I value my career. That's something that I'm really passionate about. But that sentiment, I think, is a good one, where children thrive on relationships and imagination. That's how they learn. That's how they have fun. That's how they enjoy life. And I think as adults, sometimes we want to provide them with all the things, and they learn to want that. And I don't think that's necessarily what they need or what they naturally crave.
But parents are competitive. I guess I don't have maybe a whole lot to like add to this conversation from a first-hand perspective, but maybe, so I'll be careful with where I tread here. But from an outside the box perspective, as someone that deals with a lot of kids and parents are competitive, man. Sometimes I don't even think it's the kids that are competitive. It's like, no, it's not like keeping up with the neighbor next door. It's keeping up with the neighbor's kid next door, where they got to have the nicest jeans, and they got to have like, oh, they're going to a summer camp, we're going to a better summer camp, we're going for 2 weeks instead of a week, and oh, what did they get on their test? Oh, now we need a specific tutor to keep up with them, and so it becomes like this arms race of like parent spending with no real goal in mind, I don't think, other than just to like do better than the person next to you.
It really is. There's a mindset of if you want to, you can spend $1 million raising your kid if you want to. You can buy everything new. You can buy all the latest gadgets for your baby when they're coming home with you. Buy all brand new baby clothes and toys. You can spend a lot of money raising your child if you want to. But there are so many places and so many ways you can save money these days as well by buying secondhand children's clothes, for example. You can buy brand new, basically, children's clothes for $1 or $2 for a pair of pants versus $15 or $20 at the store.
Resale shops are my favorite. That's the best.
Or go to one of these. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask. I mean, I used to use consignment shops, right? Because because we could take my son's old stuff, especially when he was younger and before he started ruining everything by falling down in it. But before he started ruining everything, when he was younger, we could take it into the consignment shop. We could get in-store credit for what we had turned in, and then we could just turn around and spend that on the next size up of gently used clothing.
Absolutely. Resale shops are a lot the same way. It's just you don't have to go, like they'll tell you right there on the spot if they're going to buy your clothes or not, and some of them will give you cash, but it's pretty much the same idea as consignment, and they're both really, really awesome. So
nice. So one of the things that you said earlier that really kind of struck me was you said that you still work and you're passionate about your career. There have been recent studies that show that children of working mothers actually do pretty well. They have empathy, and they're a little bit more independent. Is that something that you see in your own kids? Is it something that you're trying to foster in them, or I don't know. I just put it out there.
I see a lot of that in my own kids, but I also see a lot of all the good things in my kids. Like, I'm totally biased. I think that early childhood education plays a lot into that. I think whenever you do have two parents working, those children are shown to have stronger social skills, stronger language skills when they're younger. So they may be more socio-emotionally mature at a younger age because of all that exposure, and because a lot of times they're in a setting now where we have so much focus on early childhood education that they're actually getting an education, and they're not just going to, well, free play is a large part of it, but they're not just going to somebody's house. They're going to a structured environment where they're getting all of that input. So yes, I do think I see that in my own kids, but I also know that those early childhood years and the education that your kids get in those years plays into it a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too, though, that staying at home has lots of advantages for kids too when you have a parent that stays at home. And I think it kind of depends on your family. It works well for you. I know that both Tom and Peter, both of your wives stay home. So what kind of benefits have you guys seen from that? Not just financial, but in other ways for your kids.
I know with us, they're probably a bit closer with us, we find, compared to some of the parents we know that do work. I don't mean that parents that work don't.
No, I didn't mean like what I said offensively either. Like, those kids catch up, but yeah. Mine are the same way because they're at home all the time. So.
Yeah. But one thing we did notice though is when they're but by staying home and not being in some kind of daycare or something, is it did take them a little longer though actually to adjust to kindergarten and preschool before that. So there's negatives too. We just didn't have any parents around us that really had kids that age, so they kind of spent the first 3 or 4 years not having all these kids around them, and they had to adjust to that.
Yeah. What about you, Peter? What are some of the advantages you've seen for your son?
Well, I think it's one of the big benefits is just that your child is getting that one-on-one care, and you're able to give them more attention. You're able to take them out to do things. You're able to teach them and raise them up in the way that you want them to grow up. You can teach them things that you want them to know. And one of the big things I think about not spending way too much money on your kids is raising them up the right way and setting expectations with your kids as far as money goes, and when we spend money, when we don't, about learning contentment and being happy with the things you have and so forth. I think these days a lot of the time we're expected to buy experiences and pay for things for our kids, and we always want them to be engaged in doing things and being in activities and this and that and the other thing. And I think back to my childhood, and it was in the summertime, instead of all these activities, my mom would just send us outside to play in the backyard with some matches and, a knife or something, just go and explore and have some fun and just experience life. It doesn't cost a lot of money to have fun.
I don't know. I think having the matches, I was just going to say that. The matches might be an expensive decision.
12 or 13 years old, maybe. Anyway. Kids don't need a lot of activities and a lot of high spending in order to have fun is the point of all that.
That's true. Yeah, so what are some of the things then as they get older? I mean, you guys all have children that are much younger than my son, and so you guys talk these wonderful high ideals of they can just run around and play outside and they'll be happy, but things start to happen, what Kyle was saying, when they start going to school and they start seeing other kids and seeing what other kids have and what other kids do, it kind of changes a little bit. And one of the things I've run into is my son's, all of a sudden he was at school and he was like, wait a sec, so-and-so has this and so-and-so does this. And it kind of changes things a little bit because, yeah, you can teach them these things, you can try and teach them contentment, and you can teach them these things all you want, but once they get there and they're bombarded with all of these new ideas and new messages, it's really hard to maintain. And and I've tried really hard to kind of keep it, reasonable for my son. But we do have, you do want him to have activities. I do want him to be in the band. I'm glad he's in the band. I'm glad he wants to do fencing. And so it does start to add up a little bit. And do you guys have plans in place to prepare your finances for that point? I mean, I only have to do it with one. But Bryn and Tom have 2 already. And I don't know what Peter's plans are, but he's got at least one right now.
I'm scared of future kids' activities. I know there's family members pushing for our boys to go into hockey, and
don't do that.
I know. Not only not exactly the safest sport, but it's the price of the equipment and all these trips they go on and stuff.
There's $200K right there, Tom.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think I'm going to push towards things like soccer, and here's some just a few things like a ball and stuff, and keep it cheap, because the amount of different programs you can put kids into, it does scare me, the idea of driving around constantly and paying for all this stuff.
What about you, Bryn? Are you do you have do your kids are you going to have your kids do activities? What are you looking at here?
Yeah, we've done a couple of really cheap league stuff like soccer. We're going to be doing baseball in the spring, but they're not in school yet, so we kind of have the ability to choose, hey, we're going to go to we're going to shop around for leagues. But when they get older, it's going to be a hard pill to swallow. We're going to have a budget. We're probably not going to be able to do more than one activity at once, like at one time per kid. But I also kind of view those things as an investment, not just in them as people or something esoterical like that, but when we start talking about saving for college and everything, I think that's one of the best investments you can make, is making if they want to be, not forcing them to do anything, but if they want to be diversified and really appeal to a school, that's probably going to cut a good bit off their tuition if they can really be a good prospect for them. So a little bit of money now, hopefully a lot of savings later.
See, and that's a good point. I had a lot of scholarship offers, and part of it was I had good grades, but they weren't they weren't anything super special. But a lot of it was, I had 4-H leadership experience, I swam, I played tennis, I was in the band. So you have these activities that really can, like you said, you might spend a little more now later, but you could save in college later.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not about forcing them to do anything, but if their interest is there.
Except piano lessons.
Yeah, I kind of failed at that.
You will do.
I am totally forcing him. You have to do piano lessons. It's the only thing I'm making him do.
Character building right there.
Yeah, I think generally if you stick to activities that they can do in places like Venezuela or Brazil, so like soccer, baseball, that's going to be a better bet in the long term. And in addition to those activities, I would like to ask you guys as parents, what's the game plan for handling, when do you get a smartphone? Because I would say the vast majority of 12-year-olds have, in my small rural town, have I would say either current generation or second generation. So like iPhone 5, if you're kind of a loser at the latest. So I just want to know sort of what your thoughts are on this. And if you plan on your kid getting teased, if you're going to help them deal with that through explaining delayed gratification, because it will happen. I see it every day.
Miranda looks like she has shame, so I'm thinking she might already have one.
So
don't be ashamed. Every parent I know has to do it.
2 years ago, I would have said, totally, 15 years old. 15 years old is when you get your kid a smartphone. Guess whose kid had a smartphone last year when he was 12 years old?
Yeah.
Because it was. And the funny thing is, and it was because we moved. At the place we lived in Utah, hardly any of the kids had a smartphone. Gavin had a sad little track phone, little slide-out track phone thing. That was my old one. And
you didn't have a smartphone in Utah, pretty
no,
much.
I did. No, I did. The last 2 years I was there, I did. But he had my old slide out thing, and half the kids there thought it was cool that he even had a phone at all. We moved to Pennsylvania, and we moved into like a ritzy kind of school district, and all of a sudden he showed up and his phone was super, super lame. Even when we got him like the better version of the cheap track phone, it was still super, super lame. And he wasn't necessarily made fun of, but the problem was so his friends had like a smartphone, iPhones or Samsungs or whatever, and so they would be trying to text him or trying to send him a message through like Kik or using Skype or something, and his phone couldn't handle it. So he wasn't necessarily being made fun of, but he was just excluded by virtue of the fact that he couldn't participate because his phone couldn't handle it. So in the end, we went ahead, after he turned 12, we went ahead and got him a smartphone.
So at least in the States, that plan is what we Canadians would call reasonable. I would say the average price of a 12-year-old's phone plan in Canada is $60 to $65 a month.
Oh, no, we're not paying that price.
So just a heads up for young parents out there. They're like, oh, no, my kid won't use a smartphone. Yeah, they will.
So we're on the same plan, and we're sharing the cloud on the iPhone so that, I know what's going on his phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's just
Spending
what the plan that he tells you about. But he's actually got a Google Drive account. No, I'm just kidding, Brandon. He doesn't have a Google Drive.
It's scary how much the kids know about their phones these days and what they can do and how they can hide things, whatever. Even my little 5-year-old son, it's amazing to me how much he knows about a tablet or a cell phone. He can sit there and play games and pull up this thing and the other thing and then hand it to grandma and she can't even figure out how to turn it on. And he's showing her how to do it. But for me, I don't know if I would want to spend $500 or $600 for a kid to have their own phone. I may have it be one of those things where they need to work for the money for themselves in order to pay for their own phone.
So the compromise.
I think that can be, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I think that can be a danger when you have kids is you want to provide them with all these things, but at some point, when are you giving them too much and not saving enough for your own retirement or saving enough for your own plans down the line as well?
Yeah. So the compromise I made with my son, because there was no way in this world that he was going to be able to work it, to afford the phone. First of all, I went ahead and I got a phone using like this new Verizon program where basically the phone is free. And yes, I sold my soul for 2 years, and and I knew exactly what I was doing when I did it, so whatever. But the compromise we made was that he had to buy a life-proof case. So he had to save up the money, and these life-proof cases are like $80. He had to save up the money to get this case that totally encases the phone and kind of protects it to a degree that's higher than just like a regular phone case. So that was kind of how we went in there with that. It was manageable for him and, whatever. So I don't know. So what are your thoughts, Bryn? When are your kids getting a smartphone?
Like, I would like to say never. I don't know. But I know that's so unrealistic. One of my children has a disability, and they already use like an iPad for communication needs. So I see like a lot about like what you were talking about with like how they can just go through it so quickly. It's really intense and amazing and kind of scary because I have no idea how I'm going to spy on them in 10 years, But I mean, we're probably eventually going to cave. I really like the idea of working for it. Same thing with like we've thought a lot about like clothing and when like peer pressure starts coming into that. I really like the idea of working for it, but like you said, like in some situations, it's going to be unrealistic. So I think if we can make it fit in our budget, we're not going to blow our retirement or anything in order for our kid to be able to fit in. And I don't think you did that either, Miranda. But I really like the idea of working for it, and it's probably going to be in those preteen years, if I'm honest with myself.
So now you mentioned you have a child with special needs. What are some of the challenges that you face when you're working on putting together a budget or working on something like that? I mean, that's something that obviously I don't have any experience with. And how does that change the way you use your money and change your planning?
It makes so. With the healthcare needs, we have Medicaid for that child, and it's really important because any insurance plan that we had would not cover the services that kiddo needs, other than Medicaid. Literally the only thing that covers it. If you have a kid with special needs, you need to get on it, like whatever humility you have or whatever. It's not about that. It's about your kid. So when you're on Medicaid, a lot of those expenses like therapy, there's certain medical equipment that you might need with different disabilities. All of that, in our experience, has been covered for our specific child and their specific disability. What really makes it scary for me is not so much the month-to-month, more like the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month. It's more stressful just emotionally and physically than it is monetarily, but long term what scares me is my child may develop and be fully functional as an adult, or they may not. So retirement for me at this point isn't just thinking about me getting to death and not being broke. It's also considering what's going to happen to my child when I'm gone someday. And that's something I haven't totally sorted out. It is really overwhelming, but I think that's where my biggest financial stress comes in, because Medicaid does cover so much of what we need.
And that's a really good point that you make, is a lot of the time we look at some of these programs like Medicaid or or the child health insurance program, which is a little bit different. We look at some of those programs and we say, oh, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take government money, or we're too proud for it. But the reality is there are some situations that you really need to do it. And like you said, I mean, it's about the kids. And it's about doing what's best for your kid.
Absolutely. And I think every state varies. But with some of those programs, I think it's like the median income for this country is somewhere right between $50,000 and $55,000 a year. So I think when we talk about personal finance a lot, there's a lot of stigma around those programs and around people just need to work harder, or people just need to do this. And I think with programs like that, like, we're on it because my child has a disability. No matter how much money in the world we're making, that disability exists, and that's the insurance we need. But when you're on them for monetary reasons, I think a lot of that stigma needs to be removed when we're talking about money to the general populace, because a lot of the general populace falls in an income range where they may need those programs in order to really move up if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So what are some of the ways then the rest of us with our kids, like, how do we manage the health? I know how you manage your health insurance, Tom, but my kids are covered in Canada.
Their taxes every year.
but I mean, how do you like, now I have the magic of a great health care benefits program that I don't have, but my ex went ahead and decided to keep my son on his insurance, so that's nice. It's an amazing health plan, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But what about you, Peter? How do you manage your health care costs for kids? That's going to be one of the biggest one of the biggest costs, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we plan for. I have a good health insurance plan through my employer, so that helps. And we have the HSA, and we save up our costs every year in that to save on our taxes as well. And we just look at our expenses for previous years and start saving up that money so that we can pay for it every year. And at our house we've been extremely sick the past 5 years there, and we are constantly at the doctor, so it is a big budget item that we need to consider. And we're spending at least $6,000 a year plus all our health care premiums and so forth. So that's one of those big line items that you really need to sit down and prepare for.
And I like what you're talking about, how looking at it and kind of planning ahead. And I think that's kind of what we all sort of need to do with all of our costs and all of the things that we think we're going to do with the kids. And so, Kyle, can I ask you a really personal question?
That's what we do on this show.
That's right. You think you're going to have kids someday, or have we scared you?
Actually, I've been scared long before you guys. I teach, so I get to see how much of a roll of the dice having kids can actually be. We wouldn't say never, but we've certainly, I think at this point, odds are, I'd say pretty good that we won't have children. I could see us being, I had an uncle that was a late life adopter of 3 young girls, and I could see us doing something like that as a possibility, but we definitely have no plans currently to have children.
Very cool.
Yeah, much to my parents' chagrin, but that's a whole nother story.
So actually, you bring something up now that you've mentioned grandparents a little bit. So one of the things that I kind of struggle with a little bit is my son is the only grandchild on his dad's side, and so when they send him birthday presents, they just send him like a pile of money, like a big pile of money. And of course, on the other side, my mom has, I don't know, going on 11 grandchildren or something. I don't know. But my mom has grandchildren, and my siblings keep having kids. And so, my parents can't give everybody $100, for their birthday. And so, so part of the problems that I have now is, what do you do when somebody is like just giving your kid stuff, or giving your kid expensive presents, or giving your kid, piles of money? I'm very uncomfortable with it, but I have no idea how to make it stop.
I wouldn't be uncomfortable with the piles of money, but our problem is because I would teach them savings. We put it in the RESP.
Yeah, we do that too. We do that, but
that's not our problem. Our problem is that nobody wants to give them money. They all want to get them toys, get the boys toys. So we end up with way too many toys at birthdays and Christmases and stuff. And I would love to have a relative give a check or cash or something so that we can teach them what to do with it. But the opportunity just doesn't exist.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But yeah, is anybody else a little bit uncomfortable when people like do that? Or I don't know whether I'm uncomfortable because of the money coming in, or I'm uncomfortable just because of that disparity, right? Because he sees that Grandma and Grandpa 1 giving him like, whoa, lots of stuff and lots of money, and Grandma and Grandpa 2 obviously can't. And so, we had to sit down and talk about, like, well, it's not really a measure of how much they love you. it's reality.
And that is a conversation you need to have, to sit down and talk about that, because a lot of times people end up feeling that way.
Right.
Certain people are very sensitive to those types of things where, that I didn't get a gift from this person, that means they don't like me or they don't love me, or and that for kids that can be a consideration. So again, it goes back to talking with your kids and setting expectations and helping them to be content with what they have. And again, it's hard at times, but has to start young and have to start pounding that into their heads when they're tiny.
All right. Well, I think that we probably have covered this subject, unless anybody else has something they want to throw out there. Crickets. So let's do our final word. Tom, we'll start with you. What is your final word on raising kids without going broke?
I think the biggest thing with kids is you got to watch out how your emotions can affect things. If it's easy for me to say I'm not going to spend money on myself, but when you have kids, then it's like there's whining, there's crying, there's begging, and it adds a not pressure, but certainly emotion where you want to do certain things for them that you might not have done for yourself necessarily either, and you got to watch sort of what you teach them by that. So yeah, just don't fall for the the emotional sort of connection you have there.
Okay. What about you, Peter? What's your final word?
My final word is to start young with your kids, teaching them, like I talked about, the true meaning of money and the value of money, and talk about, help them to become self-sufficient in life, because that's going to really take them a lot further than relying on all these presents and toys and money and how these things can fulfill them and so forth. And you also don't want them to be those boomerang kids that end up coming home after they've left home. One poll from the National Endowment of Financial Education showed that almost 60% of parents are providing or have provided in the past financial support for their adult children. So start young so that you don't end up having those kids that are coming home and staying with you and living with you and never end up leaving.
What about you, Kyle? What's your final word?
Since I don't have kids, I'll maybe go back to my experience as a child, and Bryn talking about some of the things that she does with her children that are free. I think one of the best things and one of the things that's helped shape some of my values is volunteer with your children. Volunteering is obviously free, and it teaches them some stuff. Never mind the value of money. It can teach them, whatever path you choose to go with your volunteering, some things more important than money. And it's just good quality time. I really, at the time, I didn't appreciate it, and now I really do, especially looking at maybe the lack thereof in some of the students I teach on a daily basis.
Very cool. And Bryn, as our guest, what is your final word?
I think, like was said earlier in the show, there's a lot of pressure on parents to compete with each other or to have all the things that are advertised to us. And that if we don't provide all those things, then we're failing our children. You're not failing your children. They need 3 basic things: food, clothing, shelter, and I'd add love. That's probably the biggest thing. And if you provide that love, no matter what experiences they're going through in life, whether it be peer pressure or suffering a job loss or something where they have to come home, or whatever their situation may be, I think they're going to be all right. So just don't give in to that kind of advertising and peer pressure that we undergo as parents, that we need to provide every last thing for them.
Okay, great. Good words of wisdom. So let our audience know once again where they can find you online.
Yep, I write at femfrugality.com, and I'm on Twitter at femfrugality, and all my other social stuff's linked up there. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Bryn, and thank you everyone for watching and listening. And until next week, be good with your money. Good night.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Google+.